we've all heard it, the talk, and when it's time to walk, you turn around, nobody's there walking with you, right? But this woman has been there when she was at the in New York City level, and she just continued to be with us as community members, right? To stand up with us, side by side, to utilize her voice, to get us in spaces where we need our voices to be heard, but also help us in that space in regards to resources. And so I am always going to hold up and raise up and talk about those who not just talk the talk, because we have enough people who do that. But let's put our hands together for the person that's walking the walk. AFT President Randi Weingarten.
It's great that we're all here. And it's great that we're having this conference. And I love that Z asked students to stand. Because I would normally start a speech and say, isn't that why we do what we do, right? But I think we're at a different place right now. And I'm really glad that Z said to us, be fearless. We like to believe that at forks in the road, we, people of conscience, will always opt for the righteous path, the moral road, the just route. And largely in our union's history, I believe we have. We fought against discrimination and the effects of past discrimination, starting with the right to vote. Likewise, as the Dreamers know full well, we champion a fair and compassionate immigration system and fight against the xenophobia spread by people from Father Coughlin to Donald Trump. We demand LGBTQ rights in courtrooms and in classrooms. We fight for equity in schools, from federal funding, from Title I to Perkins to IDEA, all the funding that helps level the playing field for kids who have been denied the education they deserve. We've taken the lead on strengthening teacher quality, including, when it's not easy, finding ways to reform due process so that great teaching is the norm in every public school in the land. And speaking of schools, and I just saw our brother right in front of me, we fight as the courageous folks from Diet have. Their hunger was to fix, not close, neighborhood public schools. And we've confronted the scourge of segregation and Jim Crow, supporting freedom schools, being amici in the support of Brown v. Board of Ed so many years ago, and, for those of you who don't know, the AFT expelled many local unions who refused to integrate, losing many, many members at that moment. These are all part of our mission, our soul, as my sister Loretta said, to make the promise of America one that is accessible to all, not just the wealthy few. The promise, and many of you have heard me say this, that you can send your children to a great neighborhood public school that is safe, collaborative, and child-centered, not test-obsessed. That you can give your kids the advantage of a college education without incurring crippling debt. You get good health care when you're sick. That promise means good jobs are available, good paying jobs where you'll be treated fairly because you have access to a union and you get a real raise every once in a while. It means you won't have to choose between your job and taking care of a sick kid or an aging parent. It means a lifetime of work culminates in a retirement with dignity. And it means, regardless of race, creed, sex, or religion, or whatever pronoun you desire, you will not fear for your children's safety on the streets, not be fearful that gun violence or police profiling will rear its ugly head, and that the law, particularly the criminal justice law, will treat people equally. I can go on, but you get the point. These values, which are the core of our union, and I would argue the core of the labor movement, they're worth every bit of blood, sweat, and tears we exert to try to secure them. And we've made progress. And frankly, as Z and so many of the other community activists in the room know, we've made progress working with each other, finding common ground, not letting past divisions stop us, the community groups in the room and the unions in the room. But Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Mike Brown, Eric Garner, Rekia Boyd, Walter Scott. Their memories tell us I haven't made enough progress. And that is why we are here this year at this conference. Not to simply champion our own piece of the justice equation, but to really work together to take on the class and the race issues that have been huge obstacles to reclaiming the promise of a better America for everyone. Every time I do this with my wrist or my fist, I definitely hurt it. You know, America generally has been better for certain groups. Able-bodied people, white males, straight people, non-Catholic white Christians. They've always enjoyed certain privileges because of power, majority status, or any number of reasons. And the same goes for white people in general. And that's been reinforced for centuries, compounded by hundreds of years of slavery. As Reverend Barber has so eloquently preached, and preached at this conference 2 years ago, and preached to many of us, he draws the line from Reconstruction to Jim Crow, to de facto discrimination created by housing patterns, lack of transportation, inequitable education, poverty, income and wealth inequality, patterns that persist today even after the passage of so many civil rights laws. When you are one of the other minorities, you kind of get it. Not totally, obviously. Like Jews remembering the death of 1.5 million Jewish babies exterminated during the Holocaust. Or frankly, like someone like me, remembering how closeted I was, even in college in the 1970s, because God forbid anyone knew I was gay. There is at least one person in this room who remembers those stories. We knew, I knew the firsthand the effects of straight privilege. And I and others, we fought it and fought it and fought it. So for 1 minute, I want to do something I never do. I want to address my white colleagues in the room. People of color make up about 30% of the United States population, but they account for 60% of those who are in prison. African American youth are more likely, if they get in trouble, to be incarcerated and sentenced to an adult prison. Black households have less than 1/10 of the wealth of white households on average, and not since Reconstruction has there been so many attempts to restrict the vote. We, my white colleagues in this room, we must do more than say. We marched in the 1963 March on Washington. We fought to help get those civil rights laws passed. We fund causes. We write checks. It's not enough to be against discrimination. It's not enough to carry the card of the ACLU or the NAACP. That, my friends, is what Black Lives Matter teaches us. I carry the New York Times editorial from a few weeks ago all the time that said the following, and I quote, "Demonstrators who chant the phrase Black Lives Matter are making the same declaration that voting rights and civil rights activists made a half-century ago. They're not asserting that Black lives are more precious than white lives. They are underlying an indisputable fact that the lives of Black citizens in this country have not mattered and have been discounted and devalued." That was from the New York Times. That is what Black Lives Matter teaches me. We must do more. And as uncomfortable as this history is, and our complicity in it, our charge, all of us, is to help change it, to act, to focus, as this conference reminds us, to advance racial justice. It is all of our fight. Please imagine what it means to be followed in stores by security personnel or suspicious clerks. Imagine insinuations that you got into a college or you got a job, not because of achievement, but because of affirmative action. Imagine that you got thrown into jail because you didn't use your turn signal. Imagine being suffocated by police officers for selling cigarettes, illegal or otherwise. That is racism. That is bias. That is a reality for a lot of Black and brown people in America. So as a woman, as a Jew, as a lesbian, as a labor leader in a time of great anti-union animus, I know that other people project biases on me, but it's nothing like the experience of our African American brothers and sisters, especially Black and brown men and boys. We need to understand the ways, large and small, that white people are privileged. Take one study. When identical resumes are submitted for a job opening, other than a name like Brendan on one and Jamal on the other, you know that Brendan gets called back a heck of a lot more than Jamal. White Americans can go a long time without ever thinking about the color of their skin. Black and brown Americans have no choice but to confront issues of race every day. Most white Americans haven't had to, and honestly, haven't wanted to confront these uncomfortable realities. We must. The assumption of innocence, the benefit of the doubt, walking without worrying, these should not be the hallmarks of white privilege. They are human rights that should be enjoyed by all. How can we move forward if those of us who have enjoyed privilege our whole lives don't at least try to understand the reality of those who have not? Don't at least try to address it. We can change laws. We can change policies. But there's another frontier we must go to. We must change hearts and minds. And that starts with truly understanding the racial realities in America. And that requires the privileged to do the hard and perhaps uncomfortable work of digging into our unconscious and our semi-conscious attitudes and biases and behaviors. It's frankly why, since 2007, I don't really like talking about myself, but I talk publicly about being gay and ask people to look at their straight privilege. But frankly, this work is harder. So as Loretta said, we're trying to do it in our own union. And we've had some of these tough conversations about race where tears flow that are very moving, and we'll have more. We must work together to change the institutions that govern our lives so they no longer privilege some and oppress others. We together must build a movement that leads that way. And I will tell you, as long as I'm the head of the AFT, we will be part of that movement. That's why I'm going to stop momentarily. The AFT's Racial Equity Task Force, under the leadership of Loretta Johnson, will share a report and recommendations with our Executive Council next week. But here's a sneak preview. We offer concrete steps to create excellent public schools for all students. We focus on boys and men of color. We focus on the ways to end institutional racism that pervades our criminal justice system and ways to challenge the systems that give 1%ers obscene advantages. We focus on politics and social change and the interconnection that we have with movements like Journey for Justice, the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools, the Fight for 15, the Dreamers, Hands Up United, and the Diet Hunger Strikers. We know that taking risks, putting ourselves on the line, and educating, and educating are essential to create social change. So let me end here. Brothers and sisters, our aspirations are right. Our values are right. But the work will be hard, and we have no other choice but to follow this righteous path, this moral road, this just route. There's a saying from the Talmud. You do know it is Friday night, and I'm supposed to be, since my partner is the preacher in my family, sitting in shul tonight, so I have to say something from the Talmud. But there's a saying in the Talmud, silence is akin to consent. The tragic culmination of so much violence against our brothers and sisters of color and against our colleagues who are trans has shocked and horrified us deeply. We cannot be silent. We must act, and not just in our comfort zone. We must act as if our lives depend on it. Not just in the fights for economic and educational justice, but in the fight for enduring racial justice. We must fight to make Black lives matter, not just changing laws, but at the bargaining table and the kitchen table. In every classroom, on every street, in every court in America. This is the moment to push for a transformation in our country. This is the moment to start to transform ourselves, to transform our communities, to transform our world. It starts today. Thank you.